Only 2 days after the wedding, my new son-in-law appeared at my door with a notary in tow. "We've sold this house," he announced smugly. "You're moving into assisted living." That grin on his face said he thought the battle was already won. I stayed calm. "Perfect," I told him. "Let's head over to the police first. They've been waiting for what I sent them about you." His expression faltered. That one sentence shifted the entire balance. At dinner earlier, the conversation had started innocently enough. "Preston, Lillian, and I need our own space," Philip said, leaning across the candlelit booth. His glass of red wine glimmered under the low lights. "Your house would be ideal for starting our family." The words landed like a splash of ice water. I put down my fork, the sweetness of cake still lingering, now turned sour. We'd just celebrated their wedding 48 hours earlier. "That's my home, Philip," I replied evenly, gripping the table's edge. "I built it with my own hands 2 decades ago." Beside him, Lillian shifted uncomfortably, her ring catching the flicker of candlelight. The cozy booth at Golden Oaks suddenly felt suffocating. Around us, couples laughed over meals, unaware that my world was being dismantled. "But it's such a large place for just one man," Philip continued, his smile never wavering. "Wouldn't you prefer something smaller? Easier to manage at your age?" My age, 68. Not young, but hardly ready for the grave. My champagne glass trembled. "We'd care for it," he pressed, brushing Lillian's hand. "Imagine your grandchildren filling those rooms." Lillian's voice cracked. "Dad, Philip, please. Don't fight. This is supposed to be a happy time." Happy? I'd just written a check for $15,000 to cover their reception. The flowers from the ceremony sat wilting in the centerpiece, brown petals curling. "At my age," I said firmly, "I'm perfectly capable of deciding what happens to my house. You're welcome to stay a short while, but you'll need to find your own place." For a split second, his polished mask slipped, something sharp flashing in his eyes. Then the charm returned. "Of course, Preston. I understand. It's just that rent is so high, and with Lillian's teaching job—" "We'll manage," Lillian cut in quickly, squeezing his hand. But her voice betrayed her worry. Philip leaned forward. "I thought we could discuss this as family. Why hold on to such a valuable property when it could serve all of us?" Valuable property. That's what he called it. Not the home where I carried Margaret over the threshold. Not where Lillian had taken her first steps. Not where my wife had lived her final days. The soft jazz felt mocking now. The waiter refilled water, with professional silence as if nothing had just shattered at our table. "No," I said. Hard, final. "Find your own home." Philip's smile thinned. "We can revisit this later, once emotions settle." Emotions? Wanting to keep the roof over my head was suddenly irrational? Lillian's face crumpled. "Maybe we should leave." Leave. To my house. The same one Philip had already been asking about. Utilities, taxes, neighborhood values. I shoved my chair back, the napkin slipping to the floor. My pulse pounded in my ears. Pulling out my wallet, I slapped down 2 $20 bills. "Cover the rest," I muttered. "I need air." As I stood, Philip called after me. "We'll talk again, Preston. You'll see reason." The restaurant's warmth clung to me as I strode toward the exit, away from Lillian's pleading gaze and Philip's calculating smile. Outside, March air stung my face. My hands shook as I dug for my car keys. The ride home passed in silence, Lillian's reflection, watching me through the rear view. By the time I reached my driveway, my tie felt like a noose. Inside, I loosened it, poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey, and sank into my old leather chair. The study greeted me with its shadows and shelves of 40 years of collected wisdom. Margaret's photo smiled from the desk. My house, my yard. Mine. The audacity of his request still burned. $15,000. I'd paid it gladly for Lillian's dream day. The reception hall, the quartet, the flowers worth more than a car. And now Philip wanted the house too. I pulled out my phone, flipping through wedding photos. Philip with Lillian, cutting cake. Philip twirling her on the dance floor. Philip shaking my hand, calling me dad. Had he been plotting all along? The whiskey burned. His smile at dinner replayed in my head, not surprised by my refusal, almost like he'd expected resistance. I drew out my journal, the one Margaret had given me at retirement. Carefully I wrote, March 2025. Philip Green pressured me to hand over my house, cited age, framed it as practical. Lillian visibly uncomfortable but sided with him, not a request to buy, not a proposal to share. He wanted it transferred as if I were some feeble old man ready for the nursing home. I walked to the window. Porch lights glowed across the street. Other families carried on with their evenings. Normal families, families without sons-in-law, treating homes like assets. Back at the desk, I opened my laptop. Bank statements, insurance, property records. Numbers marking a lifetime of careful work. The house, worth around $400,000 now, plus my pension, would easily last me decades. Philip had probed about all this before, disguised as casual questions. What's your property tax like, Preston? Great neighborhood for appreciation, isn't it? Have you thought about downsizing? I'd been proud, open. Too open. Margaret's picture caught the lamplight, her steady eyes reminding me. Trust, but verify. I'd ignored my instincts, too relieved that Lillian had found someone after her divorce 3 years earlier. I picked up the pen again. Philip Green, 38. Self-described business consultant. Vague about clients, no offices, no real calls. Yet presented Lillian with a 2-carat ring worth about $20,000. Closing the journal, I reached for my phone. Tomorrow, I'd call Edward Lloyd, my lawyer. Something about Philip didn't add up. 2 restless nights passed. On Thursday, groceries in hand, I pulled into my driveway. Every shadow felt like it carried weight now. From across the hedge, my neighbor Seal straightened, his posture alert. A retired cop, he walked over quickly. Preston, I need to tell you something, he said, voice serious. What is it? Yesterday afternoon, Philip brought a man here. Suit, briefcase, measuring equipment. My blood ran cold. They walked the property, took pictures, wrote everything down. Looked like a professional assessment to me. The grocery bags suddenly seemed trivial. How long were they here? I asked. An hour, maybe more, Seal said. Philip had a key. Let them in himself. His look told me he understood exactly what that meant. That guy spent most of his time out back, walked the fence, took photos of the footings. My hands curled into fists. I figured you knew, he added. Otherwise, I'd have called sooner. Thank you, Seal. This helps. A lot. I carried the bags inside with unsteady fingers, dropped them on the counter, and went straight to the study. The computer's startup wheel crawled, each second dragging while my mind raced through what I'd find. If Philip had been on my machine, there would be footprints. When the history finally loaded, my stomach dropped. Wednesday afternoon, while I was at the hardware store, someone had searched. Property appraisers, Chicago suburbs, real estate, valuation services, quick sale outfits, cash buyers for houses. Each term landed like a punch. I scrolled further. Legal requirements for property transfer Illinois, power of attorney basics, real estate transactions for seniors, assistance programs for older homeowners. Click by click, I opened the sites he'd visited. Professional appraisal firms, sell fast for cash companies, law practices specializing in transferring titles from elderly owners. Philip hadn't just brought an appraiser to my door. He'd mapped out the entire takeover. The chair groaned as I leaned back. This wasn't wine-fueled spontaneity at dinner. This was a premeditated operation, likely months old. I thought back to the engagement, the probing about my savings, the interest in my routine, the curiosity, masquerading as concern. Had I been a project to him from day one? My phone buzzed. A text from Lillian. Dad, are you feeling any better? Philip says you seemed upset. Maybe we can talk tonight. Talk. No doubt he wanted to present a reasonable plan, with an appraisal and legal printouts to prove it was best for everyone. The evidence glared from the screen. I picked up the phone with shaking hands and dialed. Edward Lloyd's office. This is Sandra. Sandra, it's Preston Weaver. I need to speak with Edward immediately. It's urgent. He's with a client, Mr. Weaver. May I have him? Tell him it's fraud. Real estate fraud. The words felt alien in my mouth. My son-in-law, Philip Green, is trying to steal my house. A beat of silence. I'll get him right away. The wait stretched. I paced the study while the browser history blinked at me like a confession. Preston. Edward's voice came on warm but clipped. Sandra mentioned fraud. Your son-in-law? Philip Green, I said, jaw tight. He's planning to take my home. I can prove he's researching how to do it by the book. Silence, then keystrokes, papers moving. Edward's tone shifted. Philip Green, you said? Yes. He married my daughter 2 days ago, and now... Preston, sit down, he said, suddenly urgent. Give me a moment. More typing. A low exhale. I have 3 active matters tied to a Philip Green. Same name. Real estate scams involving older homeowners. The room tilted. You're telling me this has happened before? His pattern is consistent, Edward said. Now all business. He insinuates himself into families, wins trust, then uses manufactured documents to claim title. The targets are men in their 60s or 70s, recently widowed, with adult children under financial strain. My free hand gripped the desk. But he just married my daughter. That timing fits, Edward replied. He moves quickly. Before, people consult counsel. How much did you verify about his work? Nothing solid, I admitted. He said he was a consultant, worked from home. We'd been so relieved after Lillian's divorce that I hadn't pressed. Preston, you're at immediate risk. Don't sign anything. Don't hand over financials. Don't let him handle legal paperwork. What about Lillian? She has no idea who she married. First we secure proof, then we protect the assets, he said, voice unyielding. Hearts recover. Stolen savings don't. I glanced at the screen. He brought an appraiser yesterday. Used my computer to research the whole process. That's textbook, Edward said. Independent valuation, then bogus transfer instruments, then a friendly notary to verify signatures. Tell me everything you've seen. I laid it out. The restaurant ambush, the man with the measuring gear, the online trail, the careful questions during the engagement. Classic, Edward confirmed. Come to my office first thing tomorrow. Bring the deed, will, insurance, account statements, anything tied to the property. Police? Not yet. We build an airtight record first. He's savvy. He's beaten charges before by arguing the owners consented and later had memory issues. Memory issues. The tactic stung, but the logic was obvious. One more thing, Edward added. Be cautious. If he senses you're onto him, he'll speed up. I ended the call and stared into the dark window. Philip wasn't just grasping, he was a practiced predator and I was his next mark. But 40 years in engineering had taught me to confront problems head-on. Tomorrow, Edward and I would start dismantling Philip Green's operation. I reached for the safe style and froze. At the sound of laughter in the kitchen. Philip. For the first time since the dinner, I felt something like resolve. Let him laugh. The drive back from Edward's office later felt endless, his warnings looping in my head. Professional criminal, organized scheme, multiple victims. Philip's car sat in my driveway. Through the kitchen window, he and Lillian ate, talking easily. Domestic calm that now looked like theater. I walked in with casual greetings. He answered in that warm, affable tone, the same voice that had demanded my house 3 days ago. In the study, I locked the door and slid Margaret's portrait aside, revealing the wall safe. The combination, 5-1 to 728, our anniversary, had guarded our lives for 2 decades. Inside rested the core of everything I'd built. The 1985 deed, my will updated in 2023, insurance binders, investment summaries, the papers he needed to strip away my legacy. I laid them out, the deed, stamped and notarized. Current value, about $400,000. The will, leaving everything to Lillian after Margaret passed. Bank statements reflecting decades of steady saving. Philip hadn't touched any of it yet, but Edward's voice rang in my ears. He moves fast. From the kitchen came the clink of plates, the ordinary rhythm of newlyweds, masking a hunter's plan. How many homes had he infiltrated like this? How many fathers realized too late that the threat was already sitting at their table? I opened my journal and began recording every detail, line by line, with the same precision that had carried me through a lifetime of engineering. Every seemingly caring question during the engagement, every gentle probe about finances, what I once took as concern was really reconnaissance. Preston, doesn't this house feel too large for you alone? Have you thought about what you'll eventually do with all the space? Lillian worries about you being here by yourself. Each remark had a hidden agenda. They weren't kindness, but calculations, measuring my vulnerability, my attachment to the property, even twisting my daughter's concern for my well-being. Inside the safe sat Margaret's jewelry, including her engagement ring, a 2-carat stone, nearly identical to the one Philip had given Lillian. Where would a struggling consultant come up with $20,000 for that? I methodically photographed every document and stored copies in multiple secure locations. If Philip ever tampered with the originals, I'd still have proof. The engineer in me believed in redundancy and fail-safes. My phone rang. Lillian. Dad? Are you okay? You've been so quiet since the wedding dinner. Her voice carried genuine worry, the same fear Philip was exploiting. I'm fine, sweetheart, just tired. Philip thinks we should sit down together, clear the air. Clear the air? Or stage his unveiling of forged documents and fabricated appraisals, all packaged with legal polish. Maybe tomorrow, I said. Let me get some rest first. After the call, I tightened my defenses, reset every banking PIN, contacted my insurance company to flag fraud risks, and scheduled a meeting with my financial advisor. Edward's warning echoed in my head. 3 other families ruined, 3 other fathers who trusted too much, but I wasn't one of them. 4 decades of solving complex problems had trained me to dissect threats, anticipate failures, and build protections against worst-case scenarios. I locked the files back in the safe and glanced at the clock, 9:30. Philip and Lillian were likely settling in upstairs, dreaming of a future financed by my house and my savings. Tomorrow the battle would begin. But tonight, I had one more call to make. The bank's fraud hotline picked up quickly. First National Security Department, this is Jennifer. This is Preston Weaver, account number 447291. I need to report suspicious activity involving my son-in-law. As I explained, Philip's laughter floated down from upstairs, and a slow smile spread across my face. Let him savor this final night of false security. Tomorrow, his carefully crafted world would begin to collapse, just as he'd planned for mine. 3 days stretched ahead, dedicated to research. Coffee in hand, I sat at my computer and opened Edward's file of prior victims. We had 48 hours before our meeting with law enforcement. Philip still slept upstairs with Lillian, giving me uninterrupted time. The first case, Eleanor Martinez, age 73, from Phoenix. She had married Philip in October. By Christmas, documents claimed she'd sold her home below market value to a cash buyer. Through her daughter's profile, I found Eleanor on Facebook. Her recent posts showed a cramped apartment, rising rent complaints, and photos of grandchildren she rarely saw. Compare that to earlier photos: her spacious ranch home, a vibrant garden, holiday gatherings. Edward's notes were all true. Philip's own social media told another story: a polished headshot, glowing testimonials, staged conference photos. But cross-checking dates exposed contradictions. He claimed to be in Denver for consulting while honeymooning in Phoenix at the same time. Screenshot after screenshot, I documented the lies. His LinkedIn listed 3 different office addresses in less than 2 years. His Facebook showed 4 marriages in 2 years, each following the same script: whirlwind romance, lavish wedding, sudden housing problem. On the second day, Edward connected me with Eleanor directly. Her voice trembled as she recounted. At first, he seemed so protective. He worried about me living alone, offered to handle my finances. Then one morning, he arrived with movers and eviction papers, said it was for my own good, that the house had been sold. Robert Chen in Denver described the same pattern. 6 weeks after the wedding, I was told I'd signed over power of attorney. The signature looked real, but I never signed anything. The stories aligned: professional, forgers, corrupt notaries, documents so convincing victims questioned their own sanity. Families split apart as adult children sided with the charming spouse instead of their parents. By the third day, I had built a full timeline. Philip's method never changed: identify the target through dating apps or social events, latch onto their financially pressured adult child, accelerate to marriage within 6 months, raise housing issues, commission fraudulent appraisals, and finally present forged agreements claiming the parent had consented to sell. Then came the most incriminating find: a deleted social media post, recovered through Google's cache, made just 2 days after my daughter's wedding. Another successful acquisition. This old man won't know what hit him. Retiring early thanks to property investments. It had vanished within hours, but my screenshots preserved it. His arrogance had created the perfect piece of evidence. I organized the case file meticulously: digital contradictions, victim testimonies, forged signatures, impossible notarizations. The net was tightening. Philip thought he was the hunter. Tomorrow, he would discover he was the prey. Edward called Wednesday evening to check on my progress. "This is remarkable work, Preston," he said after reviewing my notes. "Most people don't recognize the scheme until they've lost everything." "What comes next?" I asked. "Tomorrow we meet with Detective Sarah Miller. She's been watching Philip for 2 years but hasn't had the evidence to move forward. Your research may finally change that." That night, I reviewed every file, screenshot and witness statement again. In 3 days, I had gone from baffled homeowner to methodical investigator. The evidence was airtight, enough to end Philip's schemes for good. As I prepared to shut down my laptop, one last update appeared. Philip's latest Facebook post, uploaded less than an hour earlier. Big changes ahead. Sometimes family means making difficult choices for the greater good. The timing sent a chill through me. He was preparing his move, likely tomorrow, convinced I was vulnerable. I saved the screenshot. My jaw set. Let him try. I was ready. After 3 relentless days at my desk, I decided the house needed a proper cleaning. The irony wasn't lost on me, tidying my home while planning to defend it from the man upstairs with my daughter. As I shifted the coffee table to vacuum, something glinted in the light. A tiny lens, no larger than a button, tucked behind a ceramic bowl Margaret had bought years ago in Italy. My training told me instantly this wasn't harmless debris. Someone had planted a camera in my living room. My hands shook as I examined it, a professional-grade motion-activated device with a slot for a micro SD card. Philip had been recording me. The realization felt worse than his attempt to take my property. This was my refuge, the place I mourned Margaret, made private. Calls, planned my defenses, and now I knew it had all been captured on video. I resisted the urge to smash it on the spot. Evidence. If I handled this carefully, it could be decisive. With a precision screwdriver, I removed the card and slid it into my computer. The wait for recognition stretched endlessly. Then, 47. Video files appeared, covering 2 weeks, starting from Philip's third day under my roof. I clicked the first. My own image filled the screen, speaking with my insurance company about routine matters. The clarity was unnerving. Perfect audio, sharp video. File after file showed the rhythm of my life. Coffee at dawn, evening news, private conversations. With Edward. Philip had been studying me, cataloging details, hunting for leverage. But then came file 38. Philip himself stood in my living room while I was away at the store, phone in hand. His voice carried clearly through the speakers. The old man trusts me completely. By the end of the month, the house will be ours. The paperwork is almost finished. My heart pounded. Here it was. His own words. Undeniable proof. Richard. Are you sure the notary seals will hold up? Philip asked. A voice replied faintly through his speaker. These elderly targets are always the same. Proud, independent, but in the end, easy. Philip laughed, cold and satisfied. He actually covered $15,000 for our wedding. That made it simple to look legitimate. My vision blurred with fury. Every doubt was now confirmed. And then came the final blow. And the daughter. Lillian will never side with her father over her husband. She's the perfect cover. Perfect cover. My daughter wasn't his partner. She was his shield. I copied the file instantly, creating multiple backups. This recording was more powerful than all my research combined. Philip, in his own voice, laying out his intent, naming his accomplice, exposing the entire operation. Further clips revealed Richard Fox, the notary who had enabled Philip's forgeries for other victims. Their conversations outlined everything: how they selected targets, prepared fraudulent paperwork, manipulated families, and transferred properties. But Philip had overplayed his hand. His arrogance, his need to boast, had left him exposed. The very camera he had hidden to spy on me had become the weapon that would end him. I closed the laptop, my reflection staring back at me from the dark screen, and reached for my phone. The time for preparation was over. This discovery shifted everything. It was no longer about investigation, it was about prosecution. Edward had recommended Detective Sarah Miller for cases like mine, and as I dialed the precinct, I finally felt I was stepping out of defense and into offense. Philip's arrogance would be his undoing. The downtown police station loomed larger than I expected. I carried a briefcase packed with 3 weeks of carefully assembled evidence. The hidden camera footage from yesterday was the last piece in a puzzle I never wanted to solve. And the moment I mentioned Philip Green's name, Detective Miller had agreed to see me immediately. Mr. Weaver. A woman in her 40s approached, badge gleaming on her jacket. I'm Detective Miller. Thank you for coming. Her handshake was brisk, her tone professional, but her eyes held curiosity as she led me into a gray interview room. I'll be honest, she began as we sat. When you called, I wasn't expecting much. Most fraud victims have little proof. I placed the briefcase on the table and opened it with care. Detective, I spent 4 decades as an engineer. I believe in documentation. Her brows lifted as she sifted through the files, screenshots, victim statements, transaction records, and finally, the audio recordings from Philip's own surveillance device. After 20 minutes, she leaned back. This is the strongest case I've reviewed in 15 years. She turned to her computer, fingers flying across the keys. We've tracked Philip Green across 3 states for 8 months. He's linked to at least 12 fraud cases. 12? The word left my mouth like a blow. How is that even possible? He's careful. Victims are embarrassed, evidence scarce. He knows how to make it look voluntary. Her screen displayed a map dotted with red pins across Illinois, Colorado, and Arizona, each pin a ruined family. Well, I'm not embarrassed, I said firmly, and I have all the evidence you need. Her tone shifted. She leaned forward, intensity sharpening her features. Mr. Weaver, you could be the key to stopping him. But it would mean cooperating in a controlled sting. My pulse quickened. What kind of cooperation? Act normal. Let him move. Forward. We'll capture every step on tape. That's the only way to secure a conviction. You want me to pretend he's winning? Until we catch him in the act. Your recordings are strong, but the law demands proof of the fraud attempt itself. I hesitated. And my safety? She slid a small device across the table. Panic. Button. Press once and officers will be inside within 30 seconds. We'll have surveillance on your house around the clock. I turned the device in my hand. After weeks of evidence gathering, the idea of playing this role felt both terrifying and inevitable. When? Philip mentioned the end of the month in those recordings. That gives us a week. Tomorrow we'll set up additional surveillance. Coordinate with the district attorney and prepare our team. And Lillian? My voice cracked. She doesn't know who she married. Miller's expression softened. Family is always the hardest part. But protecting her means stopping him. I thought of Eleanor Martinez losing her home, of Robert Chen hospitalized by stress, 12 families gutted by the same predator. I straightened my shoulders. What do you need from me? What you've already provided is extraordinary, she said, rising to shake my hand. Tomorrow morning, our technical unit will be at your home. By tomorrow night, we'll be ready. As she walked me out, she added, in 15 years, I've never seen a victim turn the tables this completely. Philip Green has no idea what's coming. Driving home, I knew retirement was over. Tomorrow, my house would become the stage for the final act of a criminal's career. The air felt charged as I stepped inside. By 8 a.m., Miller's vans would arrive to install their equipment. I had one night to prepare myself for the role of a lifetime. With Lillian and Philip out, I sat in my study, rehearsing the moment. He'd present forged papers with practiced calm. I'd need to respond as a father blindsided, hesitant, pressured. Believable enough that he'd expose himself on camera. Morning arrived too quickly. At precisely 8:00, 3 unmarked vans pulled into the drive. Miller led the team, followed by technicians hauling sleek cases. Mr. Weaver, we'll have everything installed in 4 hours, she said briskly. Then we rehearse. I watched as my home transformed. Tiny cameras hidden in picture frames. And shelves. Directional microphones fine-tuned to catch whispers. A technician showed me crisp feeds of my living room on a tablet. Miller handed me a discreet earpiece. Direct line to our command post. We'll guide you if needed. And you'll be nearby? Across the street, officers in adjacent houses, tactical team 2 blocks out. By noon, my familiar home had become a trap, wired for sound and vision. Now we practice, Miller said. For 2 hours, a detective played Philip, testing my responses. So, Preston, let's review the house paperwork, he said smoothly. I'm not signing anything, I answered. Perfect, Miller nodded. Stay natural. The more he explains, the stronger our case. At 3, the system check began. My earpiece crackled. Testing, Mr. Weaver, can you hear me? Clear as day, I replied. Through the window, I saw neighbors greeting guests, officers blending into the block. Cecil Brown across. The street gave me the faintest nod. All systems green, Miller confirmed. Cameras lev, audio locked, backup ready. Next move is his. The house appeared unchanged, yet I knew that hidden technology, more valuable than my car, now monitored. Every sound, gesture, and breath. At 5 o'clock, Philip's car turned into the driveway. It's time, Mr. Weaver, Detective Miller's calm voice whispered through my earpiece. Remember, we're right here with you. I brushed my fingers over the panic button in my pocket. As Philip approached the door with a manila envelope, documents I knew were forged. He knocked confidently, blissfully unaware that this would be his last free evening. The bell chimed precisely at 2 o'clock, coinciding with the faint vibration of the communicator in my pocket, Miller's signal that the recording systems were fully active. Through the glass, I saw Philip climb the steps with another man carrying a leather briefcase. Both wore predatory smiles masked as charm. 3 weeks of preparation had led to this moment. I opened the door, voice steady. "Philip, and you've brought company?" His grin widened. "Preston, this is Richard Fox, licensed notary public. We have fantastic news about your housing situation." Fox, middle-aged and stiff, looked every bit the counterfeit professional. His handshake was cold and slippery. "Mr. Weaver, such an honor," he said smoothly. "Philip has explained your circumstances." They settled in the living room with theatrical confidence. Philip spread his papers across my coffee table as though he already owned the place. The hidden cameras recorded every motion, every smug glance. "Preston, excellent news," Philip said brightly, echoing the same tone he'd once used on my daughter. "The sale of this house is complete. You'll be moving to a senior residence. Everything is arranged." I scanned the documents. With the precision of a lifelong engineer, the forgeries were skillful. "Interesting. And who exactly purchased my home?" "A delightful young family. Paid well above market," Philip replied smoothly. "Richard has all the official paperwork." Fox opened his case, producing seals, stamps, and notary tools. "Legally binding, properly notarized." "I don't recall authorizing this sale," I answered flatly. "Sometimes older individuals forget these matters," Richard said with false sympathy. "Your signature confirms consent." Exactly as Miller had predicted. They were confessing to fraud on camera. "Well," I murmured, feigning uncertainty. "Perhaps we should stop by the police station, just to ensure everything checks out." Philip's mask slipped for an instant. "The police? Why involve them? No need?" "They seemed very interested when I told them about your other property dealings." The air in the room turned icy. Philip blanched and Richard's posture stiffened. "What are you talking about?" Philip's voice cracked. "I mean your activities in Phoenix, Denver, and several other cities. The authorities have been after you for quite some time." Philip sprang to his feet, scattering papers. "Nonsense! Richard, tell him these documents are legal." But Richard faltered. "Philip, you promised this was clean." "I also mean," I continued calmly, "that Detective Sarah Miller has dozens of recordings of you plotting these schemes, discussing forged notary seals with Richard here included." Richard's complexion drained. "You never mentioned police surveillance," he hissed. "Quiet!" Philip snarled, grabbing for the papers. "This old man is confused. He doesn't—" But the sound of car doors slamming outside cut him short. Through the window, unmarked vehicles filled the street. Officers surrounded every exit. Philip froze, his confidence gone. "What have you done?" "I safeguarded my home," I replied evenly. "Something you should have considered before, targeting the wrong engineer." The front door burst open. Detective Miller entered with 3 officers, their badges glinting in the light. "Philip Green," she announced, voice steady with authority. "You're under arrest. There's nowhere left to run." Philip stood trapped in the center of the room, the forged contracts still in his hands. Damning evidence now. Fraud, forgery, elder exploitation, conspiracy, interstate racketeering, Miller listed crisply. "This is absurd," Philip stammered. "Preston, tell them this is a family misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," I replied, "was believing you could steal my home." Richard raised his hands immediately, briefcase open with his criminal tools displayed. "Officers, I'll cooperate. I didn't know about his other schemes." "You're under arrest as well," Miller said. "Your cooperation will be noted." "Don't speak, Richard," Philip shouted as officers secured him. "They can't prove anything." But the cameras had captured it all. Every word, every action. "Hand over the documents," an officer demanded. Philip's final act was to try tearing them apart, but 2 officers restrained him instantly. "These are private family papers," he shouted. "They are evidence of multiple felonies," Miller corrected, carefully collecting them into the chain of custody. Outside, neighbors gathered, watching the fall of the man who had preyed upon them all. Cecil Brown stood with folded arms, nodding approval. For the record, Mr. Weaver, Miller asked, did these men attempt to fraudulently claim your property with forged documents? Yes, Detective. Using false signatures, counterfeit seals, and intimidation tactics. He's lying, Philip cried, desperation replacing arrogance. This was legitimate. I was helping an old man manage his affairs. The irony couldn't have been sharper. His defense was the very condescension that had driven me to fight back. The courts will decide legitimacy, Miller said firmly, leading him out in handcuffs. Richard quickly began confessing. I can provide details on other targets Philip had in motion, other families. I want to help prevent more crimes, Richard Fox stammered. Wise decision, Detective Miller replied. Full cooperation could reduce your sentence from 15 years to 5. As the patrol cars drove off with their prisoners, news vans pulled up. The story had spread quickly. An elderly resident had exposed a major fraud ring. Mr. Weaver, a reporter shouted from behind the police tape. How did you uncover this scheme? 40 years as an engineer taught me to solve problems methodically, I answered. When something doesn't add up, you investigate until it does. When the crowd thinned, Detective Miller returned. Outstanding work, Mr. Weaver. This arrest ties together cases across 5 states. You've likely saved dozens of families. What happens now? I asked. Trial in roughly 8 weeks. With the evidence you provided and today's recordings, conviction is almost certain. She handed me her card. The district attorney will contact you about testimony. This case is solid. I looked at my home, finally secure. The surveillance equipment would be gone tomorrow, but I knew I'd never again be the same man who had been blindsided 3 weeks earlier. Detective Miller, I said quietly, thank you for believing an old man's suspicions. Mr. Weaver, she replied warmly, you didn't just help yourself. You stopped a career criminal from destroying more families. That's something to carry with pride. As the last police car turned the corner, I realized the arrest was only one battle. The trial would close the story that had begun with Philip's arrogant attempt to claim my home. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, I would rest peacefully, under my own roof, protected by my own resolve. 8 weeks later, I climbed the stone steps of the Cook County Courthouse, carrying the same briefcase that had started it all. Spring sunlight warmed my face as I prepared for the final chapter. Detective Miller waited near the entrance. She smiled. Ready, Mr. Weaver? More than ready, I replied, gripping the handle of the case. Inside, the courtroom buzzed. Philip sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, his former swagger gone, replaced by the hollow look of a man facing decades. Richard Fox had already pled guilty, trading testimony for leniency. But the most important sight was Lillian. She sat in the front row behind the prosecution. She had filed for divorce within a week of the arrest, reclaiming both her maiden name and her strength. When our eyes met, she gave me the same warm smile I'd known since she was a child. Judge Jonathan Clark brought order. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today we determine the guilt of Philip Green on charges of interstate fraud, forgery, elder exploitation, and conspiracy. The prosecutor spoke with surgical precision. 12. Victims in 5 states, over $2 million stolen. A 3-year pattern of targeting elderly homeowners through marriage fraud. The evidence will show Philip Green was not a man of chance, the prosecutor concluded, but a predator who systematically destroyed families. Philip's attorney countered weakly. My client made poor choices, but he was manipulated. He is not the mastermind the state suggests. I nearly laughed. Even now, Philip could not accept responsibility. One by one, victims testified. Eleanor Martinez from Phoenix, her voice breaking as she described losing her home of 40 years. Robert Chen from Denver, explaining how eviction had driven him to a stress-induced heart attack. Each account mirrored the others. Then came the recordings. The courtroom hushed as Philip's own voice filled the speakers. The old man is completely trusting. By the end of the month, the house will be ours. His shoulders slumped as the evidence crushed any defense. "Mr. Weaver," the prosecutor called, "please take the stand." I stepped forward, steady. On March 25th, the defendant arrived at my house with forged contracts claiming I'd sold my property. He demanded eviction and threatened to place me in a nursing facility. How did you respond? I suggested we confirm everything at the police station, where I had already reported him after weeks of investigation. Cross-examination followed. "Mr. Weaver, could this not have been a family misunderstanding?" "With respect, counselor," I replied firmly, "systematic criminals who target seniors across state lines don't create misunderstandings. They create federal cases." Soft laughter rippled through the courtroom. Even Judge Clark allowed a faint smile. After 2 days of testimony, the jury deliberated less than 3 hours. The verdict? Guilty on all counts. Judge Clark delivered sentence swiftly. "Mr. Green, you deliberately exploited vulnerable citizens for financial gain. This court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison, with restitution to every victim." Philip collapsed as the bailiff brought the cuffs. The arrogant predator who once demanded my house now faced over a decade behind bars. Richard Fox received 5 years, parole eligibility noted for cooperation. Outside, Lillian embraced me. "Dad, I'm so proud. You didn't just protect yourself, you protected families everywhere." "Sweetheart," I said gently, "you cared for someone who fooled experts for years. That shows your heart, not weakness." Detective Miller joined us on the courthouse steps. "Mr. Weaver, this case will be studied in academies. You proved that age can mean wisdom, not vulnerability." Driving home with Lillian, she squeezed my hand. "Dad, what's next for you?" I thought about speaking engagements, fraud prevention, workshops helping victims find their voices. "Whatever comes next," I said, "I'm ready." At 68, I had learned that protecting family requires more than love. It demands planning, courage, and persistence. Sometimes that combination is exactly what justice needs. My home was safe, my daughter was healing, and Philip Green would spend the next 12 years remembering the old man who refused to be his victim.